44-year-old Victor Callahan, senior corporate investigator at a major financial compliance firm in Dallas, Texas, has spent 16 years uncovering hidden truths in people's lives. Unbeknownst to Lorraine, his wife, updating her Facebook status to "It's complicated" on a March Tuesday morning while he was engrossed in a quarterly report in the home office, marked an expensive blunder. She believed him to be engrossed in work. However, Victor was indeed working until his phone buzzed with a notification. Victor Callahan, Lorraine Callahan changes relationship status. He gently placed his phone on his desk and remained motionless for a full minute before responding. I remained motionless for 47 seconds, fixed on the wall above my screen, hearing her giggle over her phone from the kitchen. Her laughter echoed. I grabbed my own phone again, accessed my profile, fixed my gaze on the statement that still declared "married to Lorraine Callahan." Then I made a stealthy, purposeful move. By the time she opened her computer for work the following morning, the intricate world she believed she controlled was already unraveling at its edges. The story began with a call from a man named Chamberlain. However, let's rewind. Typically, I begin investigations by envisioning the conclusion first, then piecing together the journey that led me there. So let's retrace our steps. If you've ever felt like the most faithful person amidst unfaithful companions, subscribe. Leave a comment and share your experiences. Have you ever sensed something was amiss before having concrete evidence? If it's your initial visit here, welcome. Honesty is our norm, even when it's difficult. Lorraine and I crossed paths at a corporate compliance meeting in downtown Dallas back in 2009. She was an HR executive for a mid-sized logistics firm situated near Uptown, the kind of company that dealt in legitimate business, but occasionally danced close to illegality. I was smitten with her swiftly, perhaps too quickly, as my mother pointed out on our wedding day. My tendency has always been to make decisions with certainty before all evidence is presented, a characteristic she rightly noted. In 2011, we exchanged vows and purchased a house in Lakewood, east of downtown Dallas. It was one of those old neighborhoods featuring grand oak trees and expansive front porches. Living in a community where people still greet each other warmly, our life was content. Lorraine ascended the corporate ladder in human resources, eventually becoming a senior director at Meridian Capital Group, a property development company headquartered on the 22nd floor of a glass skyscraper on McKinney Avenue. Her superior there was Chamberlain Holt, whom I met only twice over a span of 12 years. The first encounter was at a company Christmas celebration in a steakhouse situated in the Design District. The second time was when Lorraine hosted a birthday dinner for her and some coworkers. Both times, Chamberlain seemed like a man who was manufactured, to put it bluntly. Perfect handshake, timely compliments, smiles appearing punctually, he appeared more of a constructed persona than an authentic one. I didn't view him with suspicion. Rather, he felt like a carefully crafted entity. I stored this observation away for future consideration and did not revisit it for years. That's another aspect of my work. Sometimes, you gather pieces long before you realize you're assembling evidence. 18 months prior to the Tuesday in March, alterations in Lorraine's behavior commenced. These modifications were not sudden or alarming to an untrained observer. She began going to the gym before work, an action new yet reasonable. She started placing her phone face down on the counter, a change I noted but chose not to investigate. On occasion, she started returning home 40 minutes later than usual, approximately thrice weekly, consistently citing traffic on Highway 75 or a late-minute meeting that ran overtime. Individually, these events appeared insignificant, and this is precisely their intention, usually unintentional. People seldom devise such deceptive strategies with deliberate forethought, as I would. Such actions are more instinctual than calculated. A gradual, self-justifying form of survival disguise, which creates its own rational alibis over time, piece by piece, until a complex network of plausible excuses is established, making the individual within the deception start to trust the explanations themselves. I've observed this in financial fraud, corporate theft, and embezzlement cases that took years to untangle as each separate transaction, when scrutinized alone, appeared legitimate. Context and pattern are crucial. Together they form a familiar pattern I've encountered before, not in my relationship, but in others. I've uncovered financial misconduct that began similarly. Subtle alterations in patterns, individually justifiable yet collectively damning. I didn't accuse her. That's the inexperienced approach. You accuse someone before you have all the pieces and lose the only advantage you have, their false sense of assurance. As Lorraine believed I was unaware, she acted carelessly, and a careless person often makes mistakes. So I waited, watched, and silently documented. I began scrutinizing our shared credit card statements, the ones we used for mutual expenses. There were 3 charges at an eatery in far-off Elam that I didn't recognize, on a Friday afternoon, a Tuesday evening, and another Friday. I compared these dates with my own calendar. I had been out of town for 2 of those days, attending a conference in Austin and visiting a client in Fort Worth. I chose not to mention it then. One winter night in February, approximately 6 weeks before the change in status, I arrived home late from work. Lorraine said she had already finished eating. There was a plate waiting for me in the oven. She was in the bedroom with the door partially closed, whispering on the phone. When I opened the door wider, she turned towards the window and said, "I'll speak to you tomorrow." She then mentioned that her sister was anxious about a family matter. My sister resides in Portland, Oregon. It was late there at 11 p.m. when I expressed my hope for improvement and departed to warm up my meal. In our Lakewood house on a chilly February night, I sat at the kitchen table and consumed reheated pasta. A sensation I hadn't felt in some time gripped me, not anger nor sadness, but something heavier, sinking into the core of my chest like ballast. A still, cold clarity I had only experienced at the onset of significant investigations. The awareness of what was before me was there, not the specifics, not who or when or where, but the contour of the situation was clear. The issue was how to act upon that insight. Not one to confront head-on, nor impulsively rage, nor freeze in fear. I am none of these. I am an investigator, and my approach is first to construct the case. On March 4, Tuesday at 8:52 a.m., I found myself in my home office with the door open, sorting through a compliance audit for a manufacturing client. Lorraine was in the kitchen preparing coffee ahead of starting her workday from home. She worked from home 3 days a week, a permanent arrangement since 2020 that she found agreeable. My phone vibrated on my desk. I peeked at it. Lorraine Callahan modified her relationship status to complicated. 47 seconds of silence ensued. Then I grabbed my phone and checked my own profile, contemplating the word married. I pondered over the pattern of events I'd discreetly noted over the past 6 weeks. The dining expenses, late calls, her habit of angling away from me when her screen was visible, a fresh password on her personal laptop, and her sudden need to take her laptop into the bathroom, something she hadn't done previously. I had never known nor cared about her old password, but I noticed the change because it was unusual. Reflected upon Lorraine's expression at the February dinner party at our neighbor Sandra's house, her silence when Meridian Capital Group's recent promotions were discussed. My mind wandered to Chamberlain Holt, and subsequently I grabbed my phone and altered my social media status, not to its complicated or single, but by updating my profile picture. The narrative takes an unexpected turn here that Lorraine was not prepared for. She assumed she was dealing with a man who, at 44 years old, navigated social media clumsily, irregularly, and without tactical planning. However, her assumption proved false. Unbeknownst to Lorraine, 3 years prior, as part of a professional development need for a financial fraud case I was consulting on, I completed a 40-hour certification course in digital forensics and social media intelligence. I have an intimate understanding of these platforms, their audience reach, and the way connections spread. A strategically placed image can be crafted to capture the attention of specific viewers. The profile picture I recently updated was captured 8 days ago at a charity golf tournament held at Royal Oaks Country Club in North Dallas, sponsored by a client firm. It was a legitimate business gathering. Among the day's images, one from the afternoon showed me standing near the clubhouse with a group, which included 2 colleagues and a professional acquaintance named Priya, a forensic accountant I've collaborated with for 4 years, married, intelligent, devoid of romantic overtones. However, the cropped version only depicted us, laughing, her hand on my arm, bathed in the soft afternoon light. Such an image, devoid of context, carries the interpretation I intended it to convey. I chose to make it my profile picture and returned to my compliance audit, continuing my work undisturbed. I did not alter my relationship status on any platform. Instead, I left married to Lorraine Callahan untouched, allowing her to ponder its significance. Chamberlain Holt was no fool. Rather, he thrived due to his strategic acumen. He managed a property development company with substantial financial leverage, which made him meticulous about risk exposure. Risk management was inherent in his professional character. So when Lorraine's social media status updated Tuesday morning and Chamberlain, who had been connected for years, saw it, he wasn't just curious. He was alarmed. Within the same hour, a photo appeared of her husband, someone he met only twice but worked in corporate investigations, appearing comfortable with an unidentified woman. This sight triggered a feeling that closely resembled controlled panic in Chamberlain Holt, despite his careful calculations, because he had overlooked one crucial detail. Communicated through a company-provided platform instead of his personal device or private account, utilizing an internal tool at Meridian Capital Group that was routed through the company's documented server infrastructure to engage in a questionable professional relationship with a subordinate employee. He failed to consider server logs. For clarity, I want to emphasize, I did not commit any illegal act. I have never violated any law in my professional or personal activities. I didn't hack anything or intercept communications. What I did was contact a previous coworker of mine, a compliance attorney based in Houston named Garrett, with whom I've collaborated on 3 distinct corporate cases. I outlined in broad terms a hypothetical scenario involving a company communication system, a supervisory position, and potential legal risks. Garrett sought clarification. I responded hypothetically. Later, I emailed Garrett with particular details about a certain individual and their company, suggesting a possible HR compliance concern that should be addressed through proper channels. I entrusted him with this information since it's his duty to examine credible disclosures. It's not my action, it's just how such systems function. I returned to my audit. Lorraine spent the majority of Tuesday morning on her phone, conversations becoming more subdued and quiet. At a certain point, I heard her step onto the back porch despite the chill. She was out there for 11 minutes. I knew this because I noted the time when she went out and again when she returned. Upon her return indoors, I detected her presence in the kitchen for some time, recognized the rhythmic opening and closing of the refrigerator door without anything being withdrawn, heard her seat herself at the kitchen table. Distinctively, the sound of a chair moved on tile, followed by the settling of a pondering individual. Not the stillness of leisure, but the stillness indicative of deep thought. I've encountered this noise before, in meeting rooms during legal proceedings. It is the noise a person makes when they are grappling with displeasing calculations. At 11:47 hours, I heard her phone ring. She responded to the call in the kitchen. I pinpointed the instant the discussion took an unexpected turn. Although I could not discern words through the walls, I am familiar with the sound of a dialogue that shifts from its initial course. There is a unique quality to the ensuing silence that follows a statement that misses the mark. I recognize it from interrogation rooms. I recognize it from legal proceedings. For 16 years, I've witnessed individuals reacting unexpectedly to information. At exactly 11:52 noon, a heavy silence seeped through the kitchen wall. 5 minutes later, Lorraine walked into my home office, appearing visibly shaken. "Who is the woman in that photo?" she inquired, her voice trembling slightly. I glanced up from my screen, maintaining composure. "Just a colleague from the charity event at Royal Oaks you may recall from February. I don't seem to remember you mentioning it." "I did," she replied cautiously. "We were on a call." A brief pause ensued. "Is there something troubling you?" Her gaze lingered on me, searching for something hidden. There was an air of calculation, anxiety, and reevaluation. She was trying to decipher what I knew, the implications of her recent phone call in relation to my photograph, and whether these 2 incidents were linked, and if so, to what extent. 72 hours after a discussion about an HR compliance review, Lorraine altered her relationship status online to married. I observed this change and remained silent. That night, she approached me expressing the desire for conversation. I concurred. We sat at our usual table in the Lakewood house, where earlier I'd eaten cold pasta in February, and she disclosed certain things to me. Not every detail, not all truths were revealed. For the past 18 months, she had been more honest than usual. She admitted that things at work were perplexing and that emotionally she had distanced herself from our marriage, a situation she hadn't managed well. She insisted nothing physical had transpired. I didn't confirm or deny this claim because its truth wasn't my immediate priority. Instead, I was confronted with the reality that my wife, sitting opposite me, publicly questioned our marriage without any prior discussion. Over time, her actions suggested a disregard for what we had constructed together. She came to this conversation only because circumstances had compelled her to. I asked, "Lorraine, may I directly inquire something?" She nodded and appeared afraid. "Do you wish to remain married to me?" She responded affirmatively, swiftly. I observed her expression, and after 16 years of studying faces, I knew she was telling the truth. It was clear she intended it, at least for now, a distinction not lost on me. I responded, "Here's what transpires next. We will consult a professional not due to my doubt, but as I am reluctant to persist in a marriage based on unproven assumptions. If you're willing to commit to the process, so am I," she agreed. Then I added, "There's something more you need to grasp. Earlier today, you disclosed our complex marital status online before informing me. Regardless of what lies ahead for us, such occurrences must never happen again. Any details concerning this marriage should first be shared between us, not on platforms, not with colleagues, not with anyone else until I am informed." By then she was in tears. I wasn't. Now I wish to share Chamberlain Holt's tale because his journey doesn't conclude silently, and you deserve the whole narrative. The investigation Garrett triggered was conducted appropriately within Meridian Capital Group. It was later discovered that Chamberlain's behavior wasn't merely inappropriate towards a subordinate, but rather a pattern emerged. Lorraine wasn't the first individual in a supervisory position with him to encounter morally ambiguous situations. There were two others. One had filed an internal complaint 2 years prior that had been set aside. The review resurfaced this issue. Chamberlain Holt was put on administrative leave in April, and by June, he had resigned from Meridian Capital Group. Given the small property development community in Dallas, his name became a cautionary whisper. I want to emphasize that I didn't fabricate any of this. I raised a legitimate concern related to compliance through proper channels and brought it to the attention of a professional responsible for investigation. All subsequent events were consequences of actions taken by Chamberlain. The system functioned as intended. That's the nature of genuine misconduct. It doesn't require fabrication, merely exposure. Beginning in April, Lorraine and I visited a marriage counselor named Dr. Patricia Webb, based in a small office complex near SMU in an area with a perpetual aroma of coffee and old bricks. Attending these sessions on Thursday evenings became, surprisingly, one of the most truthful actions we undertook as a couple. I won't divulge all that was disclosed in those consultations, for some parts are private and intimate to us. However, I will share its essence. What emerged gradually with considerable resistance from both parties was a stagnant marriage. Two individuals who had thrived independently and neglected the efforts required to thrive together. Lorraine expressed feeling unseen in a manner she couldn't express directly towards me. In our conversations, I expressed the unique solitude of being perceptive within a marriage, of observing and refraining from vocalizing observations as it felt like an unready confrontation for both parties. During our 5th session, Dr. Webb offered insight that resonated deeply since then. She remarked, "Intimacy's counterpart isn't distance, it's performance. You were both performing admirably. You'd ceased the practice of authenticity, that vanished somewhere distinct." The practice of authenticity. It's an odd thing to lose in a marriage. Odd because you don't realize it's gone until you find yourself in a therapist's office near SMU on a Thursday evening in April, recognizing that the individual opposite you is more truthful with you in this room than they've been in 3 years. I won't disclose everything that transpired during those sessions, as some of it is ours and remains private between us. However, I will share what I shared with Dr. Webb, but I will tell you what I told Dr. Webb. In our 3rd session, Webb questioned me about my lack of immediate action against Lorraine when I first sensed something amiss. I explained, "I avoided confrontation because without data, it's merely noise. You disrupt a pattern before you comprehend it, and in that instant, you only grasp what you currently know. I needed to decipher the entirety of the situation before deciding on an action." Dr. Webb followed up, "And what action did you wish to take?" After a lengthy pause, I replied, "I desired my wife back, but I wanted her to comprehend why she nearly lost her husband due to it." The misconception arises when people hear such tales. They assume the profile picture, compliance symbol, silence in response to Tuesday morning notification. They believe all of this was retaliation or punishment. However, it wasn't. It was a matter of managing information. Ensuring my wife fully grasped the genuine impact of almost letting go was crucial. After 16 years of probing, I've learned that people don't transform from lectures or shouting. They alter when they experience the real-life consequences of their actions, when what they thought was hidden becomes vividly clear. Lorraine needed to sense how close she had come, not to use it against her, but for her to understand deeply what the true edge of that precipice appeared like. Some lessons can only be learned independently. Half a year after that March Tuesday, I find myself seated on our Lakewood house's front porch. The oak trees remain, as do the neighbors who still greet us warmly. Lorraine is within preparing dinner. She's been cooking more recently, which she claims provides her with a sense of stability, and I don't challenge it because the pasta has significantly improved. I removed the picture from my profile, yet married remains in our statuses. We're no longer the same as we once were. I don't believe we can ever go back to that, and I don't think it's healthy to feign otherwise. What we have now is a newfound honesty, something I'm not certain we ever possessed before. Dr. Webb explains this isn't a reflection of our earlier years, but rather the distinction between a marriage you fall into and one you consciously decide on. We're making that choice. Every Thursday at the office near SMU, every dinner transformed from silence to conversation, every morning awakening in the Lakewood house beside a woman who chose not to step off the cliff's edge. I've been questioned about my handling of it in this narrative. If the calculated strategy, the picture, the disclosure, the 47 seconds of stillness before my action were fair. Here's my response. I regret the 18 months prior to March. I lament each evening when I opted not to inquire about a question I already knew the answer to. I regret the February dinner party where I let her fall silent without pursuing the topic. Not because confronting her sooner would have altered anything, as she wasn't prepared and neither was I, but because in marriage, silence is reciprocal. I stayed silent about her secrets, she about my ignorance of them. We both lost something we didn't acknowledge. I don't regret March 4th, because it was on this day that the silence finally ended. Not with outbursts or anger, with a photograph and a call and a wife standing in my office, realizing that the man she underestimated was the same man she married. The version of me, the one who constructs the case before acting, had always been present. She simply forgot about him. What always strikes me when I hear stories like this is that it's seldom about the change in status. The significance lies not in the image or conversation, but in the instant when a person recognizes that the one they underestimated was attentive all along. Victor didn't triumph due to his cleverness, but because he consistently cared enough to remain silent and construct his argument. This aspect often goes unspoken. The art of enduring love during another's darkest deeds. If this tale stirred you emotionally, then you already comprehend its true essence.